We called our African American studies space a black space, governed primarily by black bodies, black thoughts, black cultures, and black histories, says Ibrahim X. Kendi in How to Be an Anti-Racist. Of course, the spaces of Temple University, governed primarily by white bodies, white thoughts, white cultures, and white histories, are not labeled white. They hid the whiteness of their spaces behind the veil of color of blindness. While color blindness has been a social issue for centuries, it also appeals in discussions about architecture.
As one views history of architecture, they read through the pre-modern examples such as the Pantheon, Basilica of St. Denis, Leon Battista Alberti Santa Maria Novella. Diverse styles are discovered, such as Palladianism and modernism, while figures like Le Corbusier and Kisho Kurokawa demonstrate accepted principles of new architecture as well as Japanese architecture in society. Regional influences led to a new and diverse forms of architecture spreading around the world. However, black architecture has long been overshadowed by other more powerful groups.
Mario Gudin's Dark Space opens by stating that there is no distinct architectural style of African American architecture. Most of the limitations of African American architecture are results of historical oppression against black people. Historically, their culture has been less academically noted and often negatively stereotyped. Segregation also prevented the presence of African American creations in museums. Likewise, the only evidence of possible black style of architecture is in buildings construction in the resistance to oppression. Some examples of this are hand-built vernacular houses of working-class individuals in the South and African American churches. Through these structures, the creators use architecture as form of black liberation rather than means of oppression. Within these spaces, architecture should reveal meanings, situations, and conditions, as well as confirmation of presence of life, a black presence and a black identity built by the space. Through reactionary buildings have been created by black people to combat oppression from white supremacy. Black identity has still been represented in forms of already existing architecture.
The organization of public and private areas within the home reinforces the idea that Josephine Baker is seen as property. The house maintains the view of seeing her solely as a performer, creating gallery-like spaces on the front of the house where the people passing by could get a glimpse of her, as well as an indoor pool in which people can see in, but she cannot look out. Elena Shapira, in her text, Dressing a Celebrity, Adolf Loos' House for Josephine Baker, comments on the way Loos chose to portray Baker. She refers to the public areas of the house as an establishment, and the pool as an attraction, showing how Loos' design was made for the enjoyment of others and not for Baker's inhabiting. Furthermore, the outer part of the house was designed as the rond-plan, which reinforces the play between view and viewed. Along the facade, the objective of the house is to see Baker. Some, like Ludwig Munz and Gustav Kunstler, Joseph Reichitwer, Benedetto Bravalu, Paul Growinjik, and Piet Vollard describe the house as almost African due to it being strange and exotic, but not truly reflecting African culture. Additionally, Shapira brings attention to the black and white stripes on the upper part of the facade, of which scholars have numerous interpretations. Karen believes it's an allusion to Baker's dark skin, different from the dominating white. The ornamentation of the black and white stripes, which according to as Beatrice Colomina, Mary McLeod, Karen Bunz, and Christine Threeder, make the house stand out from the Persian landscape, represent how Baker is discriminated, but Threeder also points out while Borges women would not be able to live to draw attention to themselves like this, likely because a woman in France could not afford a house like it by themselves. Instead of being seen as a sign of discrimination, the sole factor of being able to request a house to Adolf Loos is a sign of empowerment for black women in the early 20th century. Loos explains his ideas on ornamentation in his text Ornament and Crime. He says the evolution of culture is synonymous with the removal of ornament from objects of daily use. Ornament and crime. Ornament is the sign of lower culture, it's a sign of limited intellect. His individuality is so strong it can no longer be expressed in terms of items of clothing. He sees culture expressed in intangible things like music, referencing Beethoven, but ignores how other cultures, like those in Africa, have rich tradition which is enhanced and completed through ornamentation. He sees the cultures and people who choose heavy ornamentation as inherently inferior, deciding only white men are capable of deciding when ornament is appropriate. Arguably, Luce has a problem with heavy ornamentation, like silk, velvet, and lace, but not with a modern idea of ornamentation, which is evidenced on the stripes of the Josephine Baker house, as well as his personal interest in fashion. Contrary to Shapira's views on Lewes, Charles L. Davis II links the cultural erasure Mario Gudin talks about with slavery in the United States. He discusses how African American architecture has been affected by the idea that all tectonic traditions were lost with slavery. However, through a reform in critical regionalism, it has been possible to create architectural phenomenology that represents the Black experience. The most relevant aspect of this new focus is that it focuses on the traditions and marginalizations since slavery.
In their text, Curly Crown, A Conversation and Movement, Mira Henry and John Cooper show how the Black identity has been shown in buildings through the use of ornament. When Henry describes the Iglesia de Jesucristo de Canaan, she mentions that, according to the angle and the height status a person is looking at the building, they read and view it differently based on the vantage point. It could be stately and severe looking at architecture with curvy ornaments or just an unremarkable mortar box. What actually grabs her attention is the curly ornamentation that is looking forward to moments of discovery and appreciation in silence. The curly ornamentation acts as the curly hair of the building. It's a big, heavy, and full curl set as a celebration of human life. As time passed, curly decorations could also be seen in Kingston, Jamaica in 1837, especially being worn by the Black in Afro-Caribbean Carnival. Jamaican Jewish artist Belisario views a crown headdress as a flat universe diagram, a spiritual cycle diagram. Black performers make their own carnival costumes or purchase them. The white masks they wear are used to indicate the existence of ancestral spirits through their characters. They express their joy toward the tradition through masquerade dances, and on the other hand, they are liberated and uphold the spirit of resisting colonial systems. Cooper begins to understand what the curliness of a curly building means to architecture. He announces that the curl is always a curling. Curls in time, curls in thought. The curls are weighty and styled. These curls present on buildings curl with the weight of history and with the revolution story of the nation. White architecture cannot be upheld without the active suppression of Black architecture. Throughout American history, groups of Black individuals have carved out their own space in a country that has systematically and systemically upheld white individuals in white spaces. Due to the nature of the promotion of white supremacy, both through strict laws prior to the early 20th century and through more covert forms of suppression from the mid-20th century into the present day, it is nearly impossible to find a Black space that has not been influenced in some capacity by white architecture. In order to create a more equitable system, minority spaces must be continued to be created for the sake of retaining and maintaining culture, while the constant promotion of white architects above Black architects, especially those who hold damaging views of people of color, should cease.